Hello, this is Dave Sugarbaker, and today is the second Sunday in September. It's the 8th of September, 2024, and I have a very familiar reading that I'm going to correlate to what the sermon is today. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord my whole life long. So today, we might call the sermon a correction, and that would appear in a little box in the newspaper. You know how the correction boxes are down on the lower part of some page inside the front page, and it's a correction. It says we said this wrong. We should have said it this way. Well, today I need to correct a mistake that I made in last week's sermon. I used the word healing in talking about grief and PTSD, when in fact I don't believe anybody heals from grief or trauma. Healing, at least the word for me, means returning to our original healthy condition. It implies becoming well again after we experience an injury or an illness, and we then recover or we heal from that injury or illness, and we get whole or healthy again. Some people say that our health system is built on an illness model. Medicine focuses on illness, and if you're sick or you're injured, they will jump in and remove the illness or the injury. If there's a pill for that, that's what you get. If you're not sick or injured, however, they're just going to leave you alone. The DSM, which is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, that's a very boring book, but it lists all of the psychological disorders that counselors can bill for. There's a corollary for physical illnesses and injuries that an MD can bill for as well, but I want to focus on the DSM. A few years ago, let me put first that the DSM is updated every few years as new disorders come into favor and other disorders drop off the list. In September of 2021, not so long ago, the American Psychiatric Association, which I'll refer to after this as the APA, the American Psychiatric Association added prolonged grief disorder to their list of treatable and billable disorders in the DSM. The APA president at the time, Vivian Pender, said, "The circumstances in which we are living, with more than 1.1 million deaths due to COVID, may make prolonged grief disorder more prevalent." Gee, you think? The APA says if intense grief lasts more than 6 months for children or teenagers, or more than a year for adults, you may be experiencing prolonged grief disorder. Well, at least the APA has told us how long we can grieve before it becomes a treatable disorder. I remember visiting a woman in the days when I was a bereavement follow-up person for hospice. I visited a woman whose husband of 50 years had been a hospice patient. The man had passed away about a month prior, And the woman's 2 sons had sat her down and suggested that it was time for her to start dating again. So that's even shorter period of time than the APA is giving us. If a young person hasn't healed, quote unquote, from his or her grief in 6 months or less, there's something wrong. And if we as adults take longer than a year to wrap up dealing with a major loss, there's something wrong. It's treatable, though. In my experience, grief doesn't really end. Period. It may mutate and evolve over time, but the loss is permanent. At best, we find ways to incorporate the loss into our ongoing life. It continues to be part of our new reality, a kind of a new normal. The same is true of trauma. There's often a lot of loss involved with trauma, although it may be harder to identify. When someone experiences great trauma, it doesn't come with time limits. Trauma affects life thereafter, however long that life might be. How we deal with the post-trauma stress may evolve over time, but we can't unring the bell. We can't edit our history. The traumatic event happened, and it will continue to be a part of who we are from then on. What we can do is come to understand our history better or differently. I feel I was wrong to associate grief and post-traumatic stress with the word healing. Loss and trauma don't heal. The last thing we need is for our culture to add an expectation that we should get over it in 6 months or a year. And when we don't heal as expected, we wind up asking ourselves, what's wrong with me? Am I somehow defective for not meeting the norms that the APA has set? That's 2 burdens for the price of 1. So how does one deal with the trauma or loss that has landed on them? Well, first of all, and I've made a list here, first of all, forgive yourself. You didn't cause it, it just happened. It's not your fault. Secondly, take all the time that you need. Don't let your culture tell you to hurry up and get fixed because others are uncomfortable with your struggle to regain your stability. Take all the time you need. Also, do your if-onlys as many times as you need to. Analyze the situation, look at it from all angles. It's okay to be depressed about it. It's okay to be angry about what happened. Sometimes with re-examination, we can understand our history better, perhaps from a perspective of more maturity. But the AAs say the beginning of wisdom is to call things by their right name. Further, you may need to tell the story more times than anyone wants to listen. And if so, hire a therapist to listen as many times as you need to tell the story. And finally, you will move into a new normal. Going back to the way it was before just isn't going to work. You will need to incorporate the trauma or loss in a way that leads to a new iteration of you. The 23rd Psalm is often used in the context of loss or trauma. The psalmist points to God as our shepherd, our protector, our host, our guide. Love is an important aspect of coming to terms with loss. Even when we encounter the worst, that is, as the psalmist says, even in the valley of the shadow of death, the psalmist says, we don't have to be afraid because God is with us. The psalmist says, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Now, if God's with us, love is with us. God is love, right? So where God is, love is. And where love is, God is. And love casts out fear. So when we're in the midst of the trauma or loss, yeah, we can be sad, we can be angry, but we don't have to be afraid. And that can go a long way to helping. It's an individual journey to discover our new normal, but the support of others can sometimes ease the burden. And so that love, that support, that understanding that comes from other people can be a real benefit, a real help sometimes. It's important to me not to leave any misunderstanding on the table from what I feel may have been the misuse of the word healing. And so I thank you for your time as I issue my correction. God bless you. Stay safe. I'll see you soon.